go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I know some of you have already been chairing dissertations, and I hope that you will just offer comments and your observations as we go along here. But thank you for being here. I think it's really important that we all have a common understanding about how we need to work with our students and what the expectations are for our dissertations. So here's just kind of an overview of what I plan to cover today, kind of a discussion about what our dissertations look like, and the fact that we are CPED related and we do CPED dissertations in practice. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the role of the chair, the qualifying exam process, and they are different for cohorts 13 and before, and cohorts 14 and future. They have two different qualifying exam processes. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The preliminary proposal process, the IRB process. King, you can help me here. The final defense process, and we have created a dissertation committee handbook that we're going to distribute, and I'm just going to go over the compensation part of it for right now, but I'm waiting for feedback from our policy committee members, and then I'll distribute the final copy of the dissertation handbook, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers. So as I mentioned, our dissertations are really problems of practice and applied research, which is right in line with the Carnegie Project and the Education Doctorate that are called dissertations in practice. And we're really trying to take the research that's out there, applying theory and applying it to practice. So we're hoping that students will find a problem of practice to solve through their dissertation research. We do want it to be rigorous. Well, we would like it to be publishable in a refereed journal. And able to be presented at national and regional conferences. So it really should be a rigorous piece of research. But our philosophy is it's not the student's life work. It may well be after the dissertation process, but this isn't a dissertation that we think should take 1.5 to 2 years to finish. They should start working on it at the midpoint of their second year, so they have really 1.5 years to get it finished. That's a little misleading because by April they have to have their final defense. So it's not quite 1.5 years. It's more like 1.25 years to get it finished. And so when we do the dissertation seminars with the students, we give them a timeline so they know exactly what they should have done by what dates. We can include that in the handbook as well. So the role of the chair. So the role of the chair is very, very important. And to be real honest, most of these students don't really have a clue about what they're supposed to be doing in the dissertation. And they really do rely very heavily on their chair. And really, it should be between the chair and the student to get the research formulated and get chapters 1 through 3, a good and clean draft of it ready before you actually send it to the rest of the committee. But you really need to have a good working relationship with this student. So you should have the first meeting with the student, and the student should really talk with you about their major area of research, what they're really interested in doing. Most times students are way out there. They have, they want to cover everything in the kitchen sink. So you really have to keep helping them focus on what it is they're really going to research. What is the problem that they're trying to solve with this research? It's really important to set a process for how you're going to work with the students. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I send out an email about every 2 weeks to ask them what their progress is, or I meet with them every 2 weeks. I try to set up a time so that they have something due to me. I react to it, and then we meet to discuss it. And I try to keep that on about an every 2 week rotation. Now, some of the students get behind, they get bogged down with little things like their coursework. And so they sometimes put the dissertation off to the side. So I'm often sending them reminders about, give me an update. Where are you? Do we need to meet? So I really try to keep close tabs on them, because we really do want them to finish in the 3-year time frame, because it really takes a lot of resources if they're there longer than the 3 years. You need to work with your student on establishing a committee. For the most part, they won't know who to ask. And you want to be sure that you get a committee that you can work with, right? You don't want to get people on a committee that you don't have a good working relationship with, because that's bound for issues and problems. So you want to make sure that you have some input into who the committee members are. And the second committee member is either an affiliated or a core faculty member. And the third committee member is an external person to the university. And generally, you ask the student to find that person. It's usually somebody that they know that has some expertise in the area of their research. It could be their superintendent or their vice president or president of the university or their community college. So, but you need to work with them and make sure that the person has a doctorate from an accredited institution. That's a qualification for the third community partner reader. Some students have already written parts of chapter 2. What I found when I've looked at their chapter 2 is it's really not a lit review for a dissertation. A lot of times they do lit reviews for their courses, but it's not really reviewing research. It's really doing background information or theoretical perspectives. So you have them share with you, if they say they have a draft, have them share it with you early, so you can get them to understand that the lit review is really a review of research. Because like I said, most of what they've already written is not a review of research. And so you have to kind of get them to move in that direction. When I'm working with my students on their lit review, I usually get them to have research articles, and I have them do summaries of research articles and submit the summaries to me. And then I talk to them about what's missing, what needs to be added, what's too much. And then I have them do 10 to 12 articles, and then I have them organize them into common topics, and then have them put together their lit review at the intro and the summary. And we do have a format for dissertations, and it's really itemizes everything that goes into those chapters, you know, exactly what's supposed to be the subtopics. So you can share that with the student and say, you know, now you have these research articles, you need to connect them, you need to make sure that you talk about how they're similar and how they're different and what the common threads are between the research studies that you're including in that topic heading. And it usually does come together. But like I said, when they come to you with a literature review, most of the time it has information in it that belongs in chapter 1 or chapter 3. So you have to help weed it out and make sure that the chapter 2 is just a condensed review of the research literature. I'm going to stop there and see if you have any questions. Go ahead, Carmen.
So one of the questions is the committee, right? Because I joined a committee that was already established, and now, you know, Judy left, and but now we're gonna just switch roles. She said, but the third person doesn't have a doctorate. Are there different rules for?
They need a doctorate.
They don't have one.
Oh, then they can't be the third reader.
Yeah, so they've been functioning as a committee, but that was okay.
Yeah, we probably need to know who that is, and we need to let them know that that third person cannot, you know, be a third reader.
Yeah.
But usually the student has to fill out a form that everybody signed.
Yeah, that form was signed, but now we have to sign a new form with me being the chair. So that's when the opportunity will
Okay,
come.
so that's opportunity arises to
Yeah, we'll take a look at it. Okay,
yeah.
Thanks for letting us know.
All right.
Sometimes it slips by us. It shouldn't, but I mean, and it's very clear when we do dissertation seminars for the students, we're very clear with them that the third person, the third reader, has to have a doctorate.
I mean, she's an expert in the field, but no doctorate. So
Yeah.
the rules are rules. I was surprised too.
Right.
So
Yeah.
okay.
Great. Thanks. Okay. So this is, as I mentioned, I meet with my students about every 2 weeks, and it's about 20 minutes, just going over whatever they've given to me to react to, talk about next steps, going over the format, dissertation format, so they're ready. I always try to get them a target date for when they're going to have their qualifying exam, if they're before cohort 13 or before, or when they're going to have their preliminary. If you set the target date, like I've told my students right now, by like November 15th, I want you to have your preliminary defense. And if it has to go a little bit by that, then we work around it. But they need a target date so that they know exactly when they have to have their, otherwise they kind of piddle around and don't get things done. You're the lead, so all work should come through you first. Sometimes students start working with every other committee member before you've even approved the rough draft. And you don't want that, because pretty soon they start getting feedback from too many people and it could be conflicting. So what you want to do is make sure that you're happy with their draft, then send it to the committee members, and then integrate their feedback at one time rather than, you know, piecemeal and having conflicts. So you are the point person and everything should come through you. I would only share really good drafts. I would not share first drafts or rough drafts. I would wait till you thought you had a really clean chapters 1, 2, 3. I always start with 2 and then 1 and 3. I make sure that they're fairly clean, knowing and telling the student that there are probably going to be edits and that there's probably going to be feedback, and we will work with it, and we'll, you know, it's like what makes it better, right? But you don't want to make your committee members have a whole lot of work to do, because they're really not being compensated like the chair is being compensated. So you want to make sure that there's not a lot of contradictory edits and comments. I do some editing. I do have an international student right now that I'm doing a lot of editing, but I think if you have a student where you feel like you're doing too much editing, you should recommend the student get an editor and have them do some editing. And make sure they know that this person's not to write their dissertation, they're just to help with grammatical and editing kind of issues. You need to make sure the paperwork's filed timely, but it's not your responsibility to start the paperwork. I tell my students when they need to file the paperwork, but they're the ones that are responsible for getting it started and signing it and then sending it to you for signature. You're the one who sets the date for in case of 13 and before, the qualifying exam, the preliminary proposal, and the final defense. So you work with the student and getting a number of dates and times that they're available. And then you send a couple of dates and times out to the committee members so that they can, you know, so you can find some common times that everybody is available for the preliminary and final defenses. And, you know, I just wanted to talk about working with committee members with different points of views. Really, you have to just keep a mindset that they're helping to make this a better piece of work. And so you may have to do some fine negotiating, and you might need to do that without the student present. But ultimately, the chair is responsible for the final draft. You need to try to do as much of and incorporating as much of the feedback that you can as the committee members. But if there is a real conflict, you need to have a conversation with that committee person and tell them that, you know, that this is the final decision, this is how it's going to be. If they can't live with that, they might have to resign from the committee and you might have to get a third committee member. But you don't want to go into a defense with having different points of view and having the student totally blindsided during one of their defenses. So you try to get some of those different viewpoints solved before they actually go into their defense. I've had students that thought they were ready for their preliminary, their final defense, and I told them they weren't. I've been on committees where I've gotten information and they were scheduling the defenses, and I called the chair and said, this is not ready for defense and I'm not going to pass the student. So let's meet before the defense and talk about what my issues are and how we can resolve them before the student defends and I don't give them a pass. So that's your responsibility as a committee member. You want to make sure that the students has a rigorous proposal, but you want to make sure that you try to get those things ironed out before they're actually in the defense meeting. Now, people will make comments and make suggestions, but it's not like they're going to change their total purpose of their study. You know, that's pretty major. You might want to edit or reword some of the research questions, or you might have some questions about their methodology, but you don't want to go into a defense where they're ripping everything apart. That's kind of not, we don't want that happening for our students. Is there any questions or anybody? Oh, Jay, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, for folks who haven't shared, I think there's a couple thoughts there. And one is really have conversations with the student about who this third person is, because there's an awful lot of people who are third persons who haven't had experiences with a practice kind of dissertation, theory to practice. And there's an awful lot of folks out there who, I don't know, have some sort of mindset that because something happened to them, it has to happen to every other student. And so, I mean, you really have to have a conversation yourself with that third person. It's great to get ideas from the student of who, but as a chair, I always contact that third person and have a conversation about what kind of dissertation this is, what the philosophy is, et cetera, before I agree to sign that person on. And then the second part of that whole discussion in terms of the proposal or even the final defense, I encourage folks to think about always asking questions that are going to push the student to what they're going to do in terms of writing afterwards. How are they going to publish this? What other studies, what are questions that were left unanswered by the study, pointing out to them that it's perfectly legitimate. And actually what we want to have happen is for this to be the impetus for future work. But I think that's the other way to help the committee kind of stay framed in terms of this is a dissertation. It is not the student's whole life. So just thoughts.
And excellent comments, Jay. And not only that, but it's a dissertation in practice. And that is a very different kind of a dissertation than a lot of our folks have done out there for PhDs. And, they think, for their dissertation defense, you have to, grill them and test them and embarrass them and all this other stuff. And that we don't buy into that. We buy into being supportive and making it like Bose, making it better. We make it better. So, there is room for everybody's feedback, but you make excellent points. Thank you, Jay. Anybody else have any?
I got a comment. Nowadays, reputable journals publish open access articles. So my question is, does the program support students for publishing, their articles? And those journals charge a lot, ranging from $1,500 to $2,500. So the good news is, if their articles are published by those reputable journals, it will bring a lot of visibility to the program and the university.
Actually, that has not come up before. When my students ask about publishing, I tell them to go back and look in their own bibliography and look at the journals that they've cited and pick one of those journals to try to publish in, because that's where they got most of their research information from, and that's where they would want to publish. I don't know that our students are going to want to pay a lot of money to get their work published. We still, I think, at least when a student asks me, I tell them a refereed journal is the best way to go. I don't think we'd prohibit somebody from publishing if they wanted to pay the expense. But normally the advice we give our students is, hey, look at your bibliography, see where you were citing, and look at the requirements for that particular journal. And that's where you might want to start trying to publish. But we wouldn't keep
yeah.
somebody from publishing there.
Right. In terms of editing, I use two programs. One is Grammarly, and the other one is Grade Assist. And these are great tools for chairs and committee members.
Grammarly and
Grammarly and Grade Assist.
Grade Assist.
Yes, these
Grammarly is
are
well known. They have a lot of commercials. About a year ago, they get heavy on the commercials. Well, I'm not familiar with the other one.
the other one is Grade Assist. Grammarly is very good. And the other thing is, do we recommend our students to reputable dissertation editors? You know, those editors, you know, they have their websites and they charge a lot. And do we recommend our...
We don't formally, the students have an informal network. So they share with themselves informally people who can help them with the formatting and editing. But we as a program don't endorse or tell people this is the person you need to go to. But sometimes the students will ask me, and I don't have a recent contact, but just up to like a few years ago before COVID, we had several names, and I get a lot. I don't know if Sharon gets those, but I get a lot of emails, maybe two or three times a month, from someone offering, you know, and I just filed away their information. But usually I tell the student asks the other students, and then they kind of, through the informal networks, they identified someone.
The other thing is that we have a writing center, and I have recommended some of my students whose writing I find not to be at par for a doctoral dissertation to go and visit the writing center and, you know, work things out there. The question sometimes, you know, I have to ask myself is, when students recognize that they are not very good at writing, they sometimes employ other people to write their dissertation. They pay the money for that.
Yeah.
And then there's a big difference between what they write on the qualifying examination. They're writing, there's a complete disparity between the two, you know, pieces of evidence. I don't know what the committee here or anywhere in this ADD program, you know, thinks about this and how we should handle this.
It needs to be their work and only, you know, edited, not written by somebody else. And I think, Joseph, that has been true particularly with the international students that we had. I had a lot of issues, and I did have her get an editor, but I could tell it was still her work. You know, because I could tell from what she'd written before and her thematic lines that she was in fact writing the material. But her grammar in translating was just, it was backwards.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the part of doing a doctoral dissertation or any graduate program is the, you know, the task of writing. And the more you write, the better writer you become.
yes.
And so, you know, the thing is that, are we fostering that, or are we, you know, permitting them to get through? Because it is good to get them through also.
Yes. Well, we do have the writing. When Audrey was here, she had the weekly
Yes.
and Stacy's going to start that again. So we are going to continue that.
Yeah.
And we also know that there's a graduate writing center that we do send the students to.
So Sharon, I want to ask this question. Is there a way in which, in addition to what, you know, Audrey and the next person is going to be doing, be more collaborative with the writing centers. So we employ them to attend some of these meetings. Maybe not necessarily every time, that would be excellent though. But if one of their members could attend periodically to, deal with, because I don't think our students, given this culture now of, working Zoom, I don't know how that works with the writing center. I mean, does the writing center promote and facilitate work through Zoom?
Yeah, they
Um,
do Zoom sessions.
Okay, that's great. That's super. That's very good.
That's a good suggestion, Joseph. I wrote a note, collaboration with the Writing Center, and I think that's something we'll have Stacy look into, and maybe we
Look
can
into that.
have a good meeting with them. So good. Thank you very much for that.
And I think to answer Joseph, some of the things I do with meeting with them every other week or every 2 weeks, depending on what their needs is once they write a piece, you review that piece with them, and they should be able to talk it, walk you through why they're thinking that. And that's really what it's about. And if it's not, then I stop them there. That, okay, you wrote something down, but you really don't know what you wrote. So
Yeah.
let's go back. I'm going to meet with you next week and see if you can get this so you can tell me exactly what you wrote and why you wrote it.
Right.
And so
Right.
that helps. And then they know and they come prepared to talk what they wrote. It's not just you review it. So that's very helpful.
Yes. And that would signal whether they are doing the writing or someone else is doing the writing too. That's the way you could pick that up.
Yeah.
Good.
Plus,
good.
the other thing too is that we're kind of following the rules that, I'm not saying the rules weren't followed before, but international students really aren't there. This program is not set up for international students. The legislation is real clear on it. So for the last maybe 3 cohorts, we've been very clear with international students that this program is it's not set up for, in other words, it's not, to get your doctorate and then go back to your country of origin. It's supposed to be like a grow your own California residence.
Yes. But we do have students who are not familiar with academic writing, and they really do need the assistance of the Writing Center and the work that Stacy will be doing. So, we want to meet students where they are, and we want to make them good scholarly practitioners and writers. So that's really part of what's going on in this dissertation process. So let me talk about this qualifying exam process for cohorts 13 and before. We don't have a whole lot of students that don't have chairs already for cohort 13 and before, but every once in a while somebody shows up that needs a chair, and they have to start this whole process. So we really have 2 different processes now, people from cohort 13 and before, and 14 and beyond. And cohort 13 there and beyond and before, their lit review is about, their qualifying exam is about their literature review. So they really have to write their literature review. And then the committee, once you believe it's a good draft, you share it with the committee and ask the committee for feedback on the lit review, and for each of them to write a question that will be used, that could be used in the qualifying exam. The chair is responsible. Sometimes I have had committee members that submit 2 or 3 questions, and sometimes they're submitted and they don't make good sense to me. So I do some editing on them. Or if nobody responds and doesn't send me questions, then I make up all 3 questions and then send the 3 questions to the committee and say, are these questions, do you approve these 3 questions? So you have to be a little bit of flexible on the questions, but there needs to be 3 questions written and they relate to the lit review. They set up a time with Catherine to go, and she proctors the exam. They get 3.5 hours. They do not get the questions ahead of time. They are given the questions the day of the exam. They write to the exam. They have no references. They can't access the internet. The questions are given to the committee. The committee grades them. There is a format for that, and those forms are all in the dissertation handbook. And you usually give them 2 weeks. You get basically, in general, committee members get 2 weeks to review literature reviews or chapters before the preliminary defense before it actually happens. We really try to give the faculty members the time to do a nice, good, deep read of the material. So they get it about 2 to 3 weeks before the qualifying exam. Then we set the exam, and then the student takes the exam. The faculty, all 3 faculty members grade it. And if there is a conflict about the grading, you need to meet and resolve the conflict and decide whether the student passes or whether they have to retake the exam. They get 2 chances to pass. So far we've only had 1 or 2 people have to retake it, but for the most part,
Yeah.
the students are pretty well prepared to take it.
Yeah, and then what I do is, and again, and there's not too many of these people. We have the list, but let's say there's maybe 6 or 8 of these folks who are
Left.
still out there left. So we got to get these 6 to 8 people done, and then Sharon will explain the new process. But in terms of the old people, I try to facilitate, because we want to get them through. So the way I do is I have the student work on chapters 1, 2, 3. Then we do the qualifying exam based on questions that are meaningful to those first 3 chapters. And then provided they have the first 3 chapters and the qualifying exam, then right away you can schedule the proposal. It makes it easier, and then they do the proposal, and then once the committee's okay with that, the student applies for IRB. And so really it's getting the student to complete chapters 1, 2, and 3 facilitates everything else after that.
Enrique, I heard some difference in what you were saying and what Sharon said. So Sharon is saying that the qualifying examination is based on the literature review.
Yes, it's based on chapter 2.
And what
Yeah.
I heard
I do
Enrique
it, yeah,
say,
I do
not-
it differently. I do it, chapter 1 doesn't really count, but in terms of the qualifying exam, it's very general. But so usually for the students that I've helped, again, we're trying to get them through. I like to include 1 question that's like methodology. So 2 questions are chapter 2, and then 1 would be from chapter 3.
So the qualifying
way I do
exam
it.
is based on the first 3 chapters, not on the.
It's not
literature review.
supposed to be, Enrique. It's really supposed to be on chapter 2.
Yeah.
Period.
Well, this is the way I've done it, because it's kind of 2 and 3. We've had years ago, we talked about it, and it was the same, not a conflict, but some people like to do chapters 1, 2, and 3 because it helped the student. But I'm just saying, in my experience, the main point is if they can have chapters 1, 2, and 3 ready, everything else can come quickly after that.
So do we need to discuss this further, have a vote on what it is supposed to be?
Actually, I don't think it's that much of an issue because we only have about a handful of students left to do
Yeah.
it. So
But it could impact 1 student, and we could be, say a student who is given 1, 2, and 3 to write an exam on and finds themselves failing, could say, I was given a bigger load than you guys were.
No, because it's still chapter 2, right? And it's mostly chapter 2, but it's just the way I work with the particular students that I work with, because I'm trying to like coach them along. I'm just giving you an example of the way I work with the students, right?
Okay.
But officially, it's your lit review, right?
So what happens actually when you do only literature review? there are very few students who actually address issues of methodology in their review.
You can, because they can address methodology, because in their lit review, there's all kind of methodology in there.
What I'm saying is that they often don't. They only focus on, our students typically focus on the conclusions, the findings of the pieces of research that they read. They don't question whether the findings were based on valid instrumentation or anything like that. They just jump to the conclusions, regardless of the quality of the study.
I think what Sharon said, we don't have that many. I know I have 2 that I took on to get them finished this year. And I think probably we're okay with, I don't think anything's been unfair in the questioning. So if it is, I think they could talk to the directors on that.
No, I mean, I passed that. I'm past that point. My question is, given that the students are writing their literature review only on the conclusions of those articles or those pieces of research, the question of methodology often doesn't arise. You throw in a question of methodology, and that throws them into a loop.
Well, Joseph, I talked about the lit review before you joined us, and I was very clear that in the lit review, it is about the research that's out there, and students should be addressing, for each study that they look at, that should be talking about the context, the methodology, the findings, and the conclusions. And they should summarize each one of those articles, and then they should organize them so similar research is together, and then they should draw common threads from what those studies found. So you missed that because I talked about that a little bit earlier. And I also said that the lit reviews that students do for their classwork is very different than the lit review that they should be doing for their dissertation studies. And I did spend some time earlier, so you might want to go back and look at the recording. This is being recorded about what it should look like.
Sorry for bringing that up.
Yeah. To me, I think as long as it's relevant to the student, right? So you work with the student and you want to make sure that the questions are relevant to them and to what they're doing. So if a methodology question is relevant, then by all means.
Yeah. Right. So here's a sample of 2 questions that have been used in qualifying exam questions from cohort 13 and before. And you can see that these are pretty much applied. So they look at the lit review and then say, you've read all this. Now that you know this, how would you develop a program? Or how would you conduct a research study? Now that you've reviewed all this literature and these things are important, what would you do to address this problem? So, it's really based on what they did in their lit review, and then they take that and apply that in some way. So there's still, the questions are really applied questions, how would they take that research and apply it? I'm happy to send you this PowerPoint so that you can take a look at these. Go ahead, Jay.
Just a thought, Sharon. I know you guys are working on a handbook, and I'm just wondering if maybe one of the things to include in the handbook is an outline of a generic chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It is there. It's the format is included.
So that should answer that question about how to cite studies, et cetera, in chapter 2.
Yeah, we approved, the policy committee and the doctoral faculty approved a format for dissertations, and it also has a scoring rubric that is related to that, and that is all going to be in the handbook.
So I'm just thinking that that's just a way to end this discussion and be able to say clearly this is what it is. Boom.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but we
Could I have a few quick question?
Mm-hmm.
Or just like I'm new here. Sorry. Is there a minimum length for the qualifying exam, and also if the three readers are grading the exam, what the final decision would be? Is that majority rule, or do we have a consensus, like pass, not pass?
It's been consensus for me.
So usually try to get a consensus, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a cumulative or total score. So the three people each give scores, and then you as a
Oh, I
committee.
see.
So then you as a committee then decide what is the committee's score.
I see.
Yeah,
But
each person,
yeah,
go ahead.
it entails a conversation among the committee members. And then as a committee, this is the way we've done it as a committee, we decide, okay, this is going to be the score we give the person. But
Right.
usually only in rare cases would the person get a score where they don't pass. I mean, they would have to be really, the committee would have to be really in agreement that the person doesn't pass, right? That's never happened.
Okay,
Thank you.
so the preliminary proposal defense happens after the qualifying exam. And after the chair feels that there's a good clean draft of chapter 1 and 3, the chair sends the copy to the committee with 2 weeks to read before the proposal presentation. If committee members have issues with the proposal, they should get in touch with the chair, not the student, before the proposal defense, so you can get it ironed out before the proposal defense. If you need to cancel the proposal defense and reschedule it, that's fine. But you want to have the comments to the chair so the chair can talk to the student and get those changes implemented before the proposal defense. The chair is the one who decides whether to schedule or not. And then the chair files the proposal approval form after the presentation. And we have a whole set of forms with links, and they're all going to be in the handbook. So you'll just be able to get a hold of everything in the handbook. After they have their preliminary defense, they need to go do their IRB. Everybody, the chair and the student must attend IRB workshop and complete the city certificate. And your certificate has to be no older than 2 years. So you have to redo this every 2 years. Now, I had a student this time who included everybody on their committee in the IRB as their co-directors. So that was a mess. So she had to go in and change all that. You
I get
only,
included a lot.
It was a mess. I had to go in and talk to people. Can you do this?
yeah,
Actually, now the IRB is where the faculty person is the principal investigator.
the faculty members, but the
And-
student's a co-PI. But the rest of
Exactly.
the committee is not on it. She had all 4 of us on it. And it was, because they have to certify it and all this stuff. And people don't pay attention to doing that stuff for the most part. So it's only the chair and the student is the chair is the PI and the student is the co-PI. They don't need to include everybody else on it. It gets to be quite a mess if you try to do that. What's really important is no data can be collected before IRB approval is received. You can do a pilot study that you include in chapter 3, but that data is not included in your study data, right? So if you want to pilot test an instrument before you have your preliminary defense, you want to do that because you want to tell your committee, yes, I piloted, it appears to be valid and reliable. So you want to do that, but you cannot use the data that you collected in that pilot as part of your study.
And sometimes in maybe one of the courses, you could pilot study as part of the coursework for that class.
Are we sure about this?
Yep.
Okay.
You can't use the data in your study. It's just checking validity and reliability of your instrument.
I mean, that in itself, can become a study, but you're right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure because I once had to collect some data just for use in my class, and I was told that I had to get IRB for that also. So
Well,
There's been a lot of confusion about IRB.
an instrument.
There's
but the
been a
data
lot
is
of-
not being used in the study. It's only
It was not published. It was never published. It was just used for classwork.
Yeah, but this is not even for that. This is to just establish
Yeah,
reliability and validity
yeah,
of the
that's
instrument.
good.
Okay.
Actually, King, you've been on the committee, the IRB, right? So what's your understanding?
Yeah, I'm the current chair. Generally, actually, the pilot study depends on how systematic your pilot is. So if you are really just testing an instrument not so systematically, that's generally doesn't need, you go through IRB. But if you do a really like systematic pilot study, I would recommend you to actually submit something to IRB. Yeah.
So it could be exempt then.
Yeah, that could be depending on how, right? Usually how,
Okay.
where's the setting? Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's a good insight.
Okay, chapters 4 and 5. The student is responsible for all data collection analysis, but you probably need to touch base with the students because they're going to have questions about how to do this. They've not done this before. You should carefully monitor that they're actually collecting data and not making it up. Our students haven't done that, but I know that there have been studies where students get frustrated because they're not getting good responses, so they kind of make up surveys. So you really need to closely monitor their data collection. You need to also carefully review their data and make sure it's clean data before they do their analysis. And you need to make sure they're using, if they're doing quantitative, make sure they're using the right data analysis methodologies.
So just a quick question, Sharon.
Sure.
Is it legally okay for the chair to say, can I see if they are using some kind of a software to collect data? Can I see the?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're the PI.
Because then there's a stamp from every computer that the survey is completed.
You're the PI.
Yeah.
If there is any issues with this research, you're the one that's going to be held responsible. So I look at all their data. I look at their data. I make sure that they're using the right statistical tests. It's really up to the chair to do all that.
Sharon, the second committee member is not a methodologist.
Doesn't have to be, no. Could be. I like to have a methodologist on the committee, but it doesn't have to be in our case.
Well, the chair seems to have a heavier load.
Yes, that's why you get 3 units and the committee member only gets 0.5.
So the second member and the third member are not compensated?
The second faculty member gets 0.5 of a unit after the dissertation's finished, and the third member gets nothing. They get a nice certificate where we thank them and we ask them to.
They get a thank you. What do you mean?
Yeah, and a certificate.
Yeah, a nice thing.
Stacy?
So I have a question because I've had a couple students ask me the same question. So they are both staff members of CSUSB, and I guess they have been having issues with submitting their IRB because I believe they want to gain access to student information like emails and stuff like that because they are staff here. So is that an issue? Or would they have to just go the old school way and just find a way to get access to their particular population?
Can I answer that question?
Yes, please do.
Actually, generally, yes. Actually, it's not the IRB. The IRB actually requires anyone who try to access the institutional data to just give us the permission letter from whoever, offices that's responsible to release those like listserv or email list, whatever they want. So if it is registrar office or, if it's IR, we just need that letter that say that they will release. Sometimes those offices don't release anything to students. That's probably why.
I think that's probably the issue. They don't want to release it.
Yeah. It's
that
about
makes sense.
confidentiality and what's it called? Verbo or
Yeah, the FERPA.
FERPA issue.
Plus also when you give your email access or one's assigned to you, it's probably not meant for third party
distribution.
Distribution. Yeah. The
I see,
old-fashioned
okay.
way, the old-fashioned way is that you have to figure out a
The
way
best way.
to recruit participants. But it helps to work with somebody that who does have access to it.
Yeah,
But
so
on the other hand, on the other hand, you could encourage students to sort of approach some professors they know to sort of go to their class, talk to the students and recruit that way. So the IRB is okay that if the professor say it's okay to let you to come in and introduce yourself, that's fine for us. But you have to do it sort of one by case basis, right?
Right. That's the old fashioned way.
right, yeah, I'm used to that way. Yeah, it's just that so these two individuals, they work here and they have access already to student information like their emails. So I believe
They
it's
wouldn't do
IR
it
that
in-
it's just like, nope, you can't do it because that's you have
But-
access to that as an employee,
Yeah,
but not as a student. So
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
makes
You
sense.
have to get permission.
yeah, that's a privacy, that's a whole violation of the person's
Right.
privacy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I have a question. I know
Okay.
we're taking a long time, but I did the IRB. But I guess it expired in your eyes because July was 2 years. So do you renew or you take all the courses again? I'm just curious how to do that. I don't know.
There's a
You-
refresher.
Yeah, it's a
course.
refresher course.
Oh, there is? Okay, so I'll go check it out.
Okay, final defense. So after you are clear, you think it's a good clean copy, you send all copies of chapter, actually you should send the whole thing, all 5 chapters to the committee at least 2 weeks before the defense date. Again, just like in the preliminary, if there's concerns, they should be communicated to the chair. And try to get them ironed out before the final defense. The process for the defense, and by the way, we're not doing brochures anymore, so students don't need to do the brochures. And students and visitors, during the process of the defense, the student makes a presentation, generally using PowerPoint, for about 20 minutes. We usually try to cut them off 20 to 30 minutes. They may have visitors. We do advertise it publicly. It's open to the public, but people that attend are not permitted to ask questions. Only the faculty members on the committee are permitted to ask questions. At the end of the defense, the student and all visitors are asked to leave the room while the committee debates or discusses the outcome of the defense. We assume, for the most part, students are going to have some changes to make. And if the committee feels that the changes are minor enough, they can pass them, even if they have some minor changes to make. And the committee decides whether the whole committee needs to see the changes or whether they feel comfortable just allowing the chair to approve the final changes. I've seen it happen both ways. I've seen committee members say, no, I want to see the final drafts. And I've had other committees say, no, it's fine. You heard what we want. You make sure it's in there. The student comes back in, and let's say the student has passed. Visitors and anybody else is welcome to come back. You can congratulate the student and tell them they've passed, but you cannot call them doctor, because they are not doctor until their final changes are made and until they've submitted it to graduate studies and it's been approved by graduate studies. I had a student who passed his final defense but had changes, never made the changes. 5 years went by. I saw his business card had Dr. So-and-so on it, and he had never finished. So I called him in, said, you can't do this. This is fraudulent. Delete these and come back and finish. All you had to do is make changes to your last 2 chapters. Another year later, I found a new business card, still doctor. So it's fraudulent. The student can be charged with fraud because they didn't finish. Finally, I happened to know his superintendent, and I said, I think you should ask the student for a copy of his transcripts, because it doesn't show that the doctor, and he'd already gotten a raise for finishing. So I said to the superintendent, you need to ask the student for a copy of his transcript, because you will see that the degree has not been conferred. So that student did finish in the next 3 months, but it happens. They say, well, you let me go through hooding, you told me I passed, you called me doctor at my defense, so I figured it was okay. It's not okay. Aren't doctor until the degree is conferred.
Where we do, as a program, we don't, or as a faculty, unofficially, like informally amongst the students and their family, they'll, oh, doctor, but we made a point to nothing official, nothing on paper, not even verbally. We just, congratulations, soon to be, or something. But they get some kind of confirmation once from the ScholarWorks, once everything's been submitted to ScholarWorks. And then once that confirmation is there,
Yeah.
and it's filed away, then the person's good.
Great. Okay, I'm going to switch now. I'm going to talk about, I'm in the handbook, I'm going to show you the compensation and the link to forms. And then as soon as I get the feedback from the policy committee, I'll finalize the handbook and send it to actually to all the faculty that they have.
But before that, Joseph, what's your question?
Oh, Joseph, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just messing with them. No, I'm just messing with Joseph. Sorry.
Oh, Joseph didn't have a question?
No, I'm just giving him a hard time. Sorry.
Okay. All right, let me share this. Share screen. So this is what the handbook is going to look like. It's still in draft form. It lists the qualifications, so it's very clear what the qualifications are to serve as the chair, qualifications for serving on the committee. But I want to talk about the compensation. So this is organized by cohorts 13 and before. There's one whole section, and then the next section is cohort 14 and beyond. So you can just refer to that section, whatever cohort your student's in. Okay, so for cohorts 13 and before, dissertation chairs are responsible for administering the qualifying exam, and they receive 4 units for dissertations they chair. And they're earned as follows: 1 unit after the qualifying exam, 1 unit after the proposal defense, and 2 units after the final defense. Okay, so that's how you earn them, and you can use them after they're earned. A tenured track faculty member can only chair 2 dissertations per cohort at the same time. So we have 3 cohorts going on. You could, in practice, be chairing 6 total. You could chair more than that with the approval of the directors, but generally 2 per cohort is a pretty big load. Faculty members chairing dissertations will not be issued summer contracts for working on dissertations. The full compensations for dissertations are 4 units. You get 4 units for chairing a dissertation. If you choose to work with the student over the summer, that's fine. If you choose not to work with it, you need to tell the student you're not going to work with them over the summer. Compensation for faculty members, dissertation committee members, the second reader is 0.5 units, and that units are awarded after the final defense. Community partners, there is no monetary compensation, except in some cases, they were promised a $500 stipend before this new policy was adopted. We are honoring that.
We had to honor it.
But nobody who is on one of these committees appointed after that new policy was in place is being compensated. They're being asked to join our community advisory board and are given a certificate of appreciation. Now let me go to cohorts 14 and beyond. Same requirements actually for serving on committees. The compensation is a little different. Dissertation chairs receive 3 units for each dissertation chair because they're no longer responsible for the qualifying exam. There's no qualifying exam for dissertation chairs to monitor. Then they're earned as follows: 1 unit after the proposal defense and 2 units after the final defense. A tenured faculty member still can only chair 2 dissertations. And faculty need to use their dissertations within 2-year period. So, and you can, with the permission of the program directors, you can ask for an extension. Compensation for dissertation committee members is again 0.5 units, and they're awarded after the final defense. So that's what I wanted to share. Are there any questions or comments?
Joseph, you're
Yeah.
on mute.
I just want to say thank you for the handbook. It looks really nice so far.
Oh, thank
I
you.
have a little bit more to do, but so far it looks really good.
Good, good.
Sharon, I have not seen the whole handbook, so I really don't know, but is there a description of the roles for, committee members 2
Yes.
and 3?
Yes.
Okay, that's all. I mean,
Yeah, there's responsibilities for every member.
okay.
Yeah.
I,
Roles and responsibilities of the chair, and then roles and responsibilities of the committee. Any other questions?
And it's a little confusing right now, but hopefully in a couple of years, we'll just have one system and it'll be a lot easier.
Generally, in your experience, what is the timing between, like, after they collect the data, how much time do they need to write up the result?
I think they need about a semester and a half, because the final paper has to be approved by like the mid-April, so that it isn't even through May. So they don't really have the whole semester to finish, right? They have to have their defense and have it finalized into graduate studies by
Before the
some
deadline.
April 15th deadline.
Yeah.
So they really have to have their data collected by the fall semester and mostly written up by the end of the fall semester, and have their defense by early April, early in the semester of spring. So they have chances to make any changes they need to make and get it submitted.
is that about
I
the
do have a
7th?
timeline, so I'm going to put that in as a, I don't know if I have that in as a appendix.
So is that about the 7th or 8th week of the semester?
Yeah, let's see, it's January, February, March. Yeah, it's about 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks.
8 to 10 weeks.
I have links in here to the dissertation rubric, to all the forms for cohorts 14 and 15, and for cohorts before that. And if I don't have it in here, I do have a timeline I can put on here, a generic timeline. I think I'll add that. Any other questions?
Do you have a list of who's taking the exam this semester, the qualifying exam?
Yes, it's cohort 15.
But not everyone is taking it, right?
They usually do. Yeah, everybody takes it.
Under the new system, the whole cohort comes at the same time on a Saturday morning.
Sharon, I mean, I do not know who the students are in each cohort. So is there a way to get that list?
Yes. Catherine can send you a list of students by cohort. If you just ask her to send you a list of students by cohort.
So only cohort 15 is doing the qualifying this fall.
Right,
Yeah.
cohort 15 is fall. No,
Cohort
December
14
10th.
Cohort 14 were the first ones to do it under the new system.
And they all passed. It was a very good experience. Everybody, and they all advanced to candidacy. I think there were 2 students who didn't take it because they hadn't finished their core courses. The requirement is they have to have finished their core courses and applied to take the qualifying exam. And I don't think in 15 anybody's missed any classes, so I think they'll all be eligible to take it. Any other questions? Carmen? You're muted there.
I know. I have questions, but I don't think the whole group needs to hear it. I just have questions about that student that I was telling you about.
But you want to set up a meeting, we can meet sometime.
We can do that. I'm meeting with her tomorrow just to see where she is, but I think paperwork was filed and everything, and I'm concerned
Yeah.
about telling her she's
What-
going backwards.
We not that we don't make mistakes, but we tend to scrutinize a lot before we sign off. So it's possible the student may not have done the paperwork. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, it's very possible, actually. So hopefully, I mean,
Yeah, well, send me, after you meet with her, or him or her, send me an email and I'll set up a time to meet with you.
okay, sounds good. I just want her to not freak
Yeah,
out.
we want her to get right. We don't want her to have a headache.
Yeah, because she did meet with somebody else that Judy suggested, and she told me she was gonna drop out of the program after that meeting. I'm like, you're not doing that. So anyway, she's sensitive already. So okay. I will set up a meeting. I'll let you know after tomorrow.
Okay,
This program has a lot of things, and thank goodness for sharing, but I can't keep up with everything.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's
This is
why
awesome. I wish I would have
Yeah.
had this before that.
that's why we have to have everything in writing.
I
So
love
that
it.
we can always say, okay, let's go back to what is the policy, the written policy.
And I asked her for her handbook. I said, you have to have a handbook. Like, why
She
don't
does.
we look
gave-
at that?
they had one, they got one at orientation.
Yeah, she's cohort 14. So
Whoa.
Hmm.
She should know better because she has.
that's why I'm
But
worried.
just talk. We'll have a meeting.
Okay.
So
Sounds
Sharon, a student can opt out, let's say this is cohort 14 now, or cohort 15, and cohort 15 is supposed to be taking their qualifying exams
On December 10th.
on December 10. And let's say, for example, somebody feels, or the chair of that committee that has been reviewing their, chapters 1, 2, and 3, and feel that that is not up to par.
No, they don't have any chapters written yet. We don't have them write any chapters. They've only been in the program a year and a half.
So the new Joseph, for the new cohorts,
Okay.
they take a year and a half of their core courses.
Coursework, yeah.
And then the qualifying exam are questions related to those core courses. And then after that, then they get passed to the faculty to work with.
In fact, Joseph, I sent you an email asking you to get me 2 new questions for this next cohort. Did you see that email?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, so you wrote questions last year. I need you to write questions this year.
Okay. Okay. Will do.
All righty. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you attending. And if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer. And as soon as the handbook is edited and finalized, we will send it out to everybody.
Excellent.
Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.